So you also have some hardware experience. I think my final kind of question for this section is there's an assumption that hardware wallets are not hackable, or they're the one thing we should check along the entire supply chain of signing. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so I think hardware wallets are a good idea, right? Like this is essentially a form of separation, right? Where you have a dedicated device that only runs the code that you want it to. In theory, you're not downloading programs onto it. It has a limited amount of software. It's probably the code on there is pretty audited. They're using maybe special security processor, and also you have secrets stored on there that are designed not to be exfiltrated from the device. So there's a lot of good things about a hardware wallet. Certainly, I mean, nothing is going to be perfect. So, there have been hardware wallet compromises, right? And I think there's some that maybe have better reputation than others. Ones that have good like secure element, a root of trust kind of security process in terms of all the software on the hardware wallet being validated. There's still software that runs on hardware wallets, right? So there's still, that's something that could, in theory, be compromised. Someone with physical access to your hardware wallet could do some kind of attack, right? They could take it apart and insert something in there that shows you, different transactions than you think you're seeing. Right. Is that an easy thing to do? Probably not. Yeah. Right. So I think in terms of these maybe drive-by exploits where you download a malicious software and then your hardware wallet becomes compromised, that's probably a lot less likely.
Mm. Can you say more about root of trust? Like you made it sound like some wallets don't have this.
I mean, there's many different hardware wallets on the market. I think there's some, I don't want to name specific ones, but there's well-known ones, and they're typically using security. Basically, the hardware is designed to only run code on it that is signed by, let's say, the developers of the hardware wallet. So it means that, let's say somebody in the supply chain, so this is another type of attack you could have with hardware wallets where like the supply chain is compromised and somewhere along the road, somebody tries to insert some malware or some code in there that makes your keys deterministic or something. So the attacker could go and steal your funds, right? So that would be bad. But so if the device has these hardware security processors and they're set up to only trust firmware that is signed by the developers, and you have to trust them that it's good, but you can sort of take out this attack surface of a supply chain man-in-the-middle attack.
So let's say I receive one of these devices at home, I unbox it. When does it check that it's running legit software?
Yeah, so like anytime you start up the device, it's gonna validate all the code that runs on it, that nobody's tampered with it.
That's every time it boots.
Yeah.
And
maybe even every time when you're signing transactions, maybe it's validating its code. I don't know.
How do we figure out if the devices we're using have this?
I think you would just look up your hardware wallet manufacturer, and it's something, it's a selling point. So, I would look for like hardware security element or secure boot.
Let's search. What do I search for? What, Ledger?
Sure. Ledger is a good example.
Ledger, root of trust?
Sure.
Secure boot?
We can try that.
All right, this looks promising. This is 2019 though. I'm gonna click on this, which is February 2025. Okay, so we're on the support Ledger page, which talks about something that sounds like secure boot. It says here, all Ledger devices pass genuine check during the onboarding process, and then each time they connect to My Ledger and Ledger Live. It sounds like basically when you set up your Ledger with Ledger Live, and then each time you connect to Ledger Live, this secure boot / root of trust check is run. which is interesting because I know some people who use their ledgers without ever touching Ledger Live.
Yeah, so my guess is that the device actually checks itself every time it starts up. But I think what this is letting you do is sort of validate that yourself. So it's kind of running, it's the software, the Ledger software you can use to run a check against the hardware. And so you're able to see kind of this full chain of trust where your software.
What this is saying.
Yeah, I know that's not what it's saying. Well, I don't.
For the listeners, let's read this. Only a genuine device can use its key to connect with Ledger's server. And I think to connect to the server, you then therefore need to connect through Ledger Live, the desktop application, right?
Yeah, so I think what they're talking about here is like I said, I think it's a way that you can, from the software, attest the hardware is genuine.
Right.
And this seems like a good thing to do. I think there are probably other hardware security features in the device that check it when it starts up, for example. Like It's not going to run unsigned firmware.
Right. Let's look up Trezor, root of trust. Does this tell you anything?
Well, so one thing, if you go back to the top, like it mentions, I guess this is the AI overview, but the newer models have the secure element chip, and that's the kind of thing I would be looking for. And so that's probably has a couple aspects to it. One of them is that it's going to, it's going to validate the firmware that runs on it, but also it's going to be designed to not allow exfiltrating of the keys that are stored on it. And that's the important thing. You don't want your keys to leave your wallet.
Right. I don't see anything about that specifically here, about being able to check. The secure element is the Optiga Trust M. Do you see anything that catches your eye?
I mean, I think there are a couple different pieces to the security. So one is we're talking about kind of firmware there. Actually, there's something there that says Trezor firmware authenticity check on the So that's maybe a bit more what I was talking about, where the device is checking this, and it looks like they're actually maybe they're also checking it online. So that's important. You don't want the device to run compromised code, and it'll probably refuse to do that. And the other thing is the secure element also has basically the hardware will not give up the keys. So they're doing signing in hardware, and they're doing basically you have this hardware which is sort of immutable, or has very specific constraints on how it can be changed, and generally extracting secrets from hardware is a very hard thing to do. You'd have to disassemble the thing and use like this very fancy equipment to try to extract things from the chip, and that's very difficult type of attack.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, just to draw a parallel against what we saw on the Ledger page, it seems like they do the same thing. You basically use the Trezor Suite, probably desktop application, and they check against their server, which stores a database of, I guess, how they would validate the firmware on the device. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to do a last check. Sorry. Keystone, which is probably one of my favorite wallets now. Keystone wallet root of trust. Not that one. Nothing obvious. What else should we look for? Check firmware.
Yeah, and it's possible it has this. Oh yeah, there you go. Well, something about key store secure element firmware. Everyone maybe uses different terminology for this kind of stuff.
Mm. Not that. Do you see anything? Actually, now I remember when I set up a demoed Keystone device, there was a step where they confirmed that the firmware was legit and involved connecting to their website as well. It was not necessary they have an air gap version of checking, but I remember that was done. Although this page basically tells me that other than that first time checking, if you want to keep checking it, you for whatever reason, then you have to do these manual steps comparing checksums, which is probably feels more clunky than assuming that every time you connect it to the desktop app that it auto checks.
So, like to give a concrete example, the hardware probably has, it's going to have some keys in it. The private key is held by the vendor, and the hardware has the public keys burned into it. And so it's able to validate the firmware that has been signed by that vendor. But it's not necessarily going to tell you all those details, and maybe you want to know more. And so they provide a way for you to actually validate whatever firmware is running on the device against some checksums provided by, provided by the manufacturer. I think it's something like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, they provide the checksum on the Keystone website. So you don't have to trust the Ledger or the Trezor desktop application. You don't have to trust the like native app that you downloaded.
I think you still do, because that app is the one that's doing this verification.
Right, but if you do this, if you follow these steps, you end up with a checksum, and then you just go to the Keystone website somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. That's them. Yeah, I think in this case, yeah, you don't need to use the app.
Okay.
Looks like you're just the device is showing you something, and you can validate it yourself.
Yeah, cool. Interesting. I keep getting impressed by Keystone. Well, I think that's it for us, Aaron.
Yeah, I guess if you want, I would say one more thing about wallets, and maybe you're going to cover this in your other section. But like you have this problem with different wallets where it'll show you something when you go to sign a transaction, right? And so even if you trust the wallet, like you need to. I think this is a common problem with these hardware wallets. They don't show you all the details, right? Sometimes the UI is kind of confusing. And so sometimes you can be signing something and not actually know, not be able to. And the problem is if somebody's compromised your computer, the only thing, if you trust the hardware wallet, you actually really need to check it on there.
Yes. Yep. Thank you so much. And maybe see you on another one.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye.